All right. Good morning, Jamie. And good morning, Randy, Ranbeen. All right. So we have CGCL and PPGPL represented. So all the key persons are here. So we'll be beginning shortly. I'd just like to say good morning to everyone. So,
good morning.
So, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nadita Ramachala. I'm the manager of the Standardization Division at TTBS, and I would like to welcome all participants to our session today for the draft technical specification for DME LPG blends for cooking applications. So I extend a warm welcome to all the participants as well as our committee members. We would like to officially start today's session, and I will introduce Mr. Rodney Ramnath, our Acting Executive Director, to deliver opening remarks. Rodney is the manager of the certification division at the TTBS, and he's currently acting as the executive director. He holds a MSc degree in project management and a BSc degree in industrial engineering, both from the University of the West Indies. He's also registered as a principal quality management systems auditor by the International Register of Certified Auditors. He has more than 15 years experience in quality management, auditing, and certification services, and he is well-versed in quality infrastructure and its mechanisms. So it is my pleasure to turn you over to Mr. Ramnath to deliver the opening remarks.
Good morning, Nadita. I'm just doing a quick mic check. Can you just confirm that you're hearing me?
Yes.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to welcome you all to the stakeholder consultation on the draft technical specification for DME LPG blend for cooking applications, TTTS 1 2020. Hopefully that will be 2022. As the name indicates, this draft technical specification establishes minimum requirements for the chemical composition of dimethyl ether, or DME for short, blended with liquefied petroleum gases, commonly known as LPG, to be used for cooking applications in Trinidad and Tobago. The purpose of this consultation is to highlight the key requirements of this draft technical specification, or TS for short, and to solicit feedback on it. This feedback will be used in our standards development process to finalize the draft technical specification. We have invited key stakeholders to share information pertaining to the blending of DME and LPG in Trinidad and Tobago. This includes Ms. Karuna Ramsakal, Energy Professional, Chemical Engineering at the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, or MEEI for short, and Ms. Donna Ramjatan, Commercial Analyst at the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago, or NGC. At this time, we would like to take the opportunity to thank the members of the Subcommittee for DME LPG Blends and the Specification Committee for LPG Systems for participating in the development of the draft technical specification. In particular, we would like to thank the chairpersons of these two committees for their dedicated service and technical expertise, namely Dr. Zina Ali from the University of Trinidad and Tobago and Dr. Nigel Jalsa from the University of the West Indies, and also Dr. Durjati Chakrabarti, also from the University of the West Indies. The development of this technical specification was undertaken at the request of the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries on behalf of the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago. to support the research and development of this new technology in our country. This initiative supports the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards strategic plan under its national standardization strategy, and in alignment with our mandate under the Standards Act number 18 of 1997. The draft technical specification supports the development of emerging technology to create a more sustainable and environmentally friendly future. DME has similar chemical properties, physical properties, and energy values to LPG when combusted. Both LPG and DME are considered environmentally friendly fuels. LPG produces low carbon emissions and minimal amounts of particulate matter during combustion and is well established nationally, whereas DME is an emerging fuel which also generates zero particulate matter on combustion with low carbon emissions. Additionally, DME is an emerging fuel globally which costs less than LPG and can be used in existing LPG infrastructure with some modifications, making it suitable for blending with LPG. Therefore, since DME is less expensive than LPG, the DME LPG blend is expected to be an economically viable alternative fuel. TTBS has opted to develop a technical specification at this time to support the research and testing required. It is expected that the technical specification will be upgraded to a national standard at a later date that is suitable for its intended use. We are keen to hear your views on this draft technical specification. Your feedback is important to ensure that the document is technically robust, meets the needs of customers, and protects health and safety. In conclusion, I once again extend a special welcome to all the representatives here today. Your presence emphasizes the fact that you and the organizations that you represent continue to play a critical role in the development of a standards-conscious society. And I wish you a productive and informative session. Thank you. Back to you, Nadita.
Thank you, Rodney, for giving us that welcome. So we appreciate your support at today's session. I will now share my screen to deliver a brief overview of TTBS's operations. Okay, so thank you everyone for your participation in today's session. Most of you all may be familiar with the TTBS and its operations, but I will just do a quick recap of our standardization process and key aspects of TTBS's mandate. TTBS has several roles and responsibilities under the Standards Act number 18 of 1997, we're the national standards body as well as the national quality certifying body, with responsibility as well for the National Laboratory Accreditation Body. Under the Metrology Act number 18 of 2004, we're also the National Measurement Institute. And two key documents I would like to mention would be the National Quality Policy, which essentially outlines the responsibilities for the development of our national quality infrastructure, and also our National Standardization Strategy, which outlines our 3-year work program with regard to standards projects. TTBS has the vision of being the essential provider of national quality solutions, leading to a standards-conscious society that is globally competitive. To support this, we are responsible for championing the development and implementation of standards, measurement systems, and conformity assessment services for competitiveness and sustainability of Trinidad and Tobago. And I would like to highlight that our national quality policy establishes the framework for the quality infrastructure, which comprises standards, measurement systems, conformity assessment services, as well as accreditation. These key aspects of the national quality infrastructure are generally provided by the TTBS with additional support from the private sector as well as the public sector, a number of regulators and government ministries. At the TTBS, we have the Standardization Division being responsible for national, regional, and international standardization. Again, metrology dealing with measurement issues. We cover industrial, scientific, and legal metrology. To support our compulsory standards, we have the Implementation Division, which provides inspections at ports and within the business itself or within trade to ensure compliance to our compulsory standards. And we also have the Certification Division providing a number of services related to management system standards, product certification, tourism. And the Certification Division also has a number of mandatory product certification schemes to ensure compliance with our compulsory standards. We are also supported by our Laboratory Services Division, covering a number of products ranging from chemical, electrical, material, fiber. I would now like to turn to our standards-related mandates. Based on the Standards Act, we are responsible for promoting and encouraging the development and maintenance of standards and shall further develop standards for the improvement of goods produced or used in Trinidad and Tobago to ensure industrial efficiency and development, to promote public and industrial welfare, health and safety, for the protection of the environment. And to help us with this mandate, we participate at different levels of standardization. So there's the international, regional, sub-regional level, and of course, TTBS operating at the national level. At the international level, you may be familiar with ISO, the International Organization for Standardization, and there is a sister body, the International Electrotechnical Commission, primarily dealing with standardization of electrical products. At the cross-SKU level, this is the CARICOM Regional Organization for Standards and Quality. Their responsibility is to coordinate and harmonize standards within the CARICOM region. And I would like to also mention that at the regional level, for North America, Latin America, and the Caribbean, we have COPANT, or the Pan-American Standards Commission. And to recap, what is a standard? I'm sure many of you all would be familiar with some of the standards developed by TTBS, so even some of the regional and international standards. A standard is a technical document that provides an agreed upon repeatable way of doing something. They provide commonly accepted and repeatable way of defining the objective technical requirements of products. And I should mention, we are speaking about both a physical good as well as services. So standards can take a variety of forms. They can be test methods, specifications, requirements, or even provide guidelines. When used effectively, standards can foster trade, protect public health and safety, preserve the environment, and promote innovation. And why should we be concerned about standards? Standards form a part of our everyday life. So anything grown, produced, and traded is subject to standards, from our mobile phones to green buildings, having transportation that is sustainable, for example, electric vehicles. We have heard a lot of issues around climate change. We have a lot of electrical safety appliance standards. So the span of our standardization activities is very broad. I would like to highlight two types of national standards that TTBS is responsible for developing. First, we can develop voluntary standards, and these standards represent minimum levels of acceptability for a product or service. They can be adopted at the discretion of business, and they are market-driven. For our compulsory standards, I would like to highlight they are essentially law or technical regulations under the purview of the World Trade Organization, technical barriers to trade agreements. So this essentially deals with standards where there's an impact on health, safety, consumer protection, or the environment. They are enforced by the TTBS, and the compulsory status is conferred by the Minister of Trade and Industry. Turning back to our voluntary standards, there are some categories of voluntary standards that can be used in a mandatory way. And this would happen, for example, if a regulator or a ministry adopts the standard into their regulatory system or framework. One key example of this voluntary use of a standard by a regulator in a mandatory way, essentially defining the criteria for electrical installations, would be the relationship that we have with the Government Electrical Inspectorate. So TTBS would issue the voluntary standard, and the requirements are enforced by the inspectorate via approving the electrical installations. Therefore, the application of the electrical wiring code by a regulator would make the requirements of a voluntary standard mandatory. And I would like to highlight this is the preferred way that we would like to address voluntary standards, where we have a close working relationship with key regulators and government ministries to ensure that the relevant standards can be enforced within the country. I have a slide here on standards development, and this is a very basic slide, and it gives the generic processes that we use. My colleague, Mr. Charles Prasad, will be going into more details into the process and specifically focus on the aspect of a technical specification. So for a normal standards development process, we follow the international process and the regional process as well. First, there has to be a need identified for the standard. And what we would have done with our national standardization strategy, we would have collected stakeholder needs and priorities to indicate our 3-year work program. Stakeholders can also come to us at the TTBS and indicate in writing what are their concerns and basically justify the need for a standard. Once we have accepted the standards project, we would conduct technical and market research. We would prepare a working draft and then assemble a specification committee to help in the drafting of the standard. And then, similar to what we're doing now, we would issue the document for public comment, essentially for 60 days, conduct stakeholder engagements like this one to get feedback directly from stakeholders to help improve the draft or address any concerns that stakeholders may have. Once the comments are resolved, and they're resolved by the specification committee itself, we would prepare the standard or the document for submission to our technical and marketing committee, which is a subcommittee of our board of directors. Our board of directors is responsible for declaring all national standards, and then we would seek to publish. For the compulsory standards, the Minister of Trade and Industry is responsible for conferring that compulsory status. Our compulsory status, we have made a significant change where our more recent compulsory standards are freely available. So generally, we can also develop other types of standardization documents. We have developed publicly available specifications, and in this case, we are developing a technical specification. The difference between a national standard and the technical specification would be the approval process. It will not be issued with a legal notice indicating that the document is a national standard. And the technical specification is especially relevant as an interim document where there's not enough information or the product or service has not reached the level of technical maturity in order to finalize a national standard. So today we are discussing a blend of DME LPG, which is a fairly new application world over. And we are taking some consideration of the safety issues that are very relevant, but understanding that there is a strong market need for alternative products. I'd like to turn our attention to our national standardization strategy. This document is available on the TTBS website, so I encourage you to take a look at it. It essentially outlines our 3-year standards work program. We collected a lot of statistical data for sectors contributing to GDP, export potential, and also where there is a significant social impact. A lot of our projects are also aligned to government initiatives. For example, the request for a standard for DME LPG came from the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, as well as other stakeholders, and we'd like to support the development of our country and any diversification efforts that are ongoing. So please take some time to look at our national standardization strategy. We welcome feedback on any new projects. Our period is 2019 to 2022, so we will be doing an updated version for the next 3 years. So we appreciate any input in terms of prioritizing the standardization needs of the country. In terms of new areas of standardization, there's a lot of emphasis on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. A lot of the new emerging standards focus on sustainability. We are also engaged in a new initiative regarding the development of net zero guiding principles. So if you have an interest in net zero, please feel free to contact me. There is a developmental project happening right now where there's going to be an international document for net zero being developed under the auspices of the International Organization of Standardization. And we are supporting the process and closely working with the British Standards Institution to help aid in this initiative. So we are also engaged in standardization related to the circular economy. We have established a national mirror committee to look at the development of international standards for the circular economy. Some of the newer standards also are focusing on sustainable building materials, e-commerce, smart cities. I should also mention a lot of work is being done in the ICT field related to digital transformation and artificial intelligence, as well as blockchain. So this is to highlight where the international trends are. And as a nation and as the national standards body in the country, we are keeping abreast of the developments and participating in the relevant technical committees. So this is the end of my very brief presentation. I will stop sharing my screen. We have a session later for any questions. So I'd encourage you to put any questions in the chat. In the question and answer session, you can raise your hand and we will allow you to unmute and raise your questions directly. So we will now turn our attention to the next presentation, the overview of DME LPG blending in Trinidad and Tobago. It will be a joint presentation from Ms. Karuna Ramsakal, Energy Professional, Chemical Engineer at the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, and Donna Ramjatan, Commercial Analysis at NGC. So please allow me to introduce both speakers. Ms. Karuna Ramsakal has been employed as a qualified chemical and process engineer at the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries since 2019 in the Downstream Petroleum Management Division, where she's tasked with monitoring the downstream natural gas sector in Trinidad and Tobago. During her period of employment at the ministry, she has gained experience in process production and safety, strong stakeholder engagements, fundamental decision-making and critical thinking skills, while strengthening her interpersonal skills and teamwork. Her major responsibilities include analyzing the performance and efficiency of downstream petrochemical plants and their products in Trinidad and Tobago in order to promote the development of downstream gas-based industry. She has a BSc in Chemical and Process Engineering from the University of West Indies and is currently furthering her education as she's enrolled in a Master of Science in Energy Engineering with a minor specialization in renewable energy. And Ms. Donna Ramjatan, commercial analyst at the NGC, her major responsibilities includes providing up-to-date business development intelligence, support for the identification, assessment, and progression of investment opportunities, and collaboration with internal and external stakeholders for the creation of long-term organizational value. She has over 19 years professional experience with over 10 years specifically in the oil and gas industry. She's a graduate of the University of the West Indies with a Master of Philosophy in Economics and is a Balanced Scorecard Associate with the Balanced Scorecard Institute. So it is my pleasure to turn the session over to both presenters, Karuna and Donna. They are critical members of the committee or the team that has worked on the draft technical specification for DME LPG blend for cooking applications. And we really value the support of both the ministry and NGC in this standardization initiative. So I turn the session over to Karuna and then Donna.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Ramachala. Okay, so I will now begin my presentation. Good morning, everyone. Today, Ms. Donna Ramjatan and myself, Karuna Ramsakal, will be providing an overview of DME LPG blending in Trinidad and Tobago. I would like to begin with introducing the contents of this presentation. We will be providing a brief summary of what is DME, provide an overview of TNT's DME plant, introduce the DME LPG blend, and end the presentation indicating the way forward. So firstly, what is DME? DME, commonly known as dimethyl ether, is a form of liquefied gas that can be made from natural gas, renewables, or from other raw materials such as coal or biomass. To the right of the screen, we can see the production process, which is utilized in Trinidad to produce DME from natural gas. The physical properties of DME and LPG are quite similar. DME is currently being focused globally as an alternative clean fuel to diesel and LPG with no emissions of smoke and particulate matters. Some of its primary applications include use as a propane supplement in cooking gas, an aerosol propellant, a refrigerant, a solvent, and a chemical feedstock. So now, I will provide some insights on the DME plant displayed on the slide. Caribbean Gas Chemical Limited Gas to Petrochemical Complex is Trinidad and Tobago's 8th methanol plant and its first DME plant. The Union Industrial Estate Complex consists of a methanol plant of capacity 1 million metric tons per year and a DME plant capacity of 20,000 metric tons per year. The DME plant is designed to produce fuel-grade DME of greater than 98.58%, and there is also the option to produce aerosol-grade DME of 99.998%. So now, let me introduce you all to the DME LPG blend. Basically, DME can be blended with LPG and can be used as a cooking fuel. One of the requirements to be noted for this blend is that the DME present in the blend should not exceed a concentration of 20% mass in its gaseous phase. With respect to DME LPG blending globally, countries such as China, Indonesia, US, and Japan are evaluating this blend. In some cases, DME is produced from renewables. And furthermore, it can be noted that 90% of China's LPG consumption goes to DME LPG blending. In Latin America, 3 leaders have announced a collaboration to test this fuel in residential and commercial applications. So now I will pass you on to Ms. Ramjatan, who will further delve on the DME LPG blend.
Good morning, everyone. Just confirming that you're hearing me clearly.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you, Karuna. I just wanted to go into a little bit of detail in terms of how we started this process. As Ms. Ramachala would have indicated, NGC, in collaboration with the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, would have approached the Bureau of Standards for the development of a national standard for the DME LPG blend. In the first instance, we would have decided to pursue the development of the technical specifications and then later on pursue the full national standard. This process would have required several stakeholders to be involved, from the regulatory bodies to feedstock producers, bottlers, logistic providers, testing bodies, and academic institutions. On the right-hand side, I just have a high-level overview of the process that we envision for detailing in the national standard, from the feedstock producers for DME and LPG, moving to the actual blending point with the bottlers, and then to distribution to retailers and end users. So as we progress with the development of the full national standard, we will be engaging all these stakeholders for details and documentation of all the processes involved. Next slide. We understand that this product is a new product, and as such, there may be several concerns regarding safety, which we hope to be delved into the standards and regulations portion of the national standards. Some of these considerations include the technical requirements, that is the raw materials to be used and the specifications of each raw material, the testing methods to make sure that the blend is consistent with the regulations as defined in the national standard, inspection of all the processes from start to finish in terms of delivery of the raw material, the actual blending of the DME LPG, as well as the insertion into the cylinders to distribution to the customers. The equipment requirements, the filling of the DME LPG blend and how it's done, and how we assess the composition in the equipment and the end result product. The end user accessories, DME LPG cylinders, how the regulators and seals and compatibility with materials to be defined and ensure that the product is safe for end use, and storage and packaging in terms of appropriate seals, labelings, and the acceptable weight in the tank and cylinder. So all these issues will have to be further discussed with all the stakeholders that we would have identified in the previous slide, to ensure that the blend is safe for use and introduction into the market for commercialization. The next slide. And lastly, and again, Mr. Ramachala would have detailed in terms of how the process works. So for the DME LPG blend, it's along that process. For 2022, our activities would include market and research and development. And this is in collaboration with academia. And this is a parallel activity that will be done as we progress the technical specification. We hope that the technical specification will be finalized by the end of the year, after which we'll move towards the development of the full-blown national standard. And this would involve engagement of stakeholders, again, pilot studies and additional research and development studies. The end result of this would result in a final executed standard and introduction into the market, again, with additional pilot studies and engagement of potential customers, all within the line of regulatory oversight. So this is just a broad timeline of how we envision the process from the starting activity of development of the technical specification, moving to the end introduction into the market. I thank you, and I now hand you back over to the moderator, and questions and comments we will accept in writing or at the end of the forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna and Karuna. We will now turn the session over to Mr. Charles Prasad. So I will just do a brief introduction to Mr. Prasad. Mr. Prasad is a standards officer in the Standardization Division. He has been tasked with the responsibility of developing a number of standards ranging from the DME LPG engine oils, as well as representing TTBS on a regional project team established by CrossQ for hand sanitizers, specifically alcohol-based hand sanitizers. He possesses a BSc in chemistry with minors in analytical chemistry and applied chemistry, along with a postgraduate diploma in project management. He has over 10 years experience working in a variety of fields such as analytical testing, quality management, manufacturing, and research and development. So Charles will now give an overview of the proposed requirements in the draft technical specification. So Charles, I'm pleased to turn the session over to you. And before I do that, I'd like to recognize Dr. Zina Ali, who's a co-chair of the subcommittee that is responsible for developing the technical specification, as well as Dr. Chakrabarti from the University of the West Indies, who chairs the LPG specification committee that TTBS would have established. So I'd like to extend my thanks and support of the initiative for both the subcommittee and the specification committee. And I turn the session over to you, Charles.
Thank you very much, Nadita. I'd just like to say good morning to everyone and welcome to the session. So, right, let's get into it. So is everyone seeing my screen and hearing me clearly?
Yes, Charles, you can go.
All right, thank you very much, Anita. All right, so yes, so we'll be getting into the overview of the technical specification for dimethyl ether blended with liquefied petroleum gas, TTTS1 20XX. So as Mr. Ramnath indicated, it should be for the end of the year, so 2022. So the contents of my presentation will be the background to the technical specification, the scope, its key requirements, and the next steps involved in the standardization process. So some background on TTTS1 20XX. So as alluded to in the previous presentation, Trinidad and Tobago now produces 20,000 metric tons per year of dimethyl ether. And as stated, dimethyl ether has similar properties to LPG, making it an ideal gas for blending with LPG. So the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries requested the development of TTTS1 on behalf of NGC. From there, so just for you to understand the nuances of the technical specification versus a standard. So as Mr. Ramachala highlighted earlier, the subject matter in a technical specification is still under development, under technical development. So it means that it's still an emerging technology and it requires development and research to go into it to truly transform it into a standard. So it's the precursor to the development of a standard. So from there, when you compare it to what a standard is, it's about subject matter that is well defined and understood and can be referenced in policy or legislation. So in this case, when you're looking at it, LPG versus DME, LPG has been around for 100 years. We have research going back to 1920s, 1910s. It's been there, it's well established. We all understand it. So we have standards for LPG versus DME, which is now an emerging technology, and the process of blending DME with LPG, which is an emerging technology. So this is where the technical specification was the route that was taken. And as we develop into the standard, as Donna alluded to in her presentation. So this is the direction and how we support the development in the country. So next we have the scope of TTTS1. This technical specification establishes minimum requirements for the chemical composition of dimethyl ether blended with liquefied petroleum gases to be used for cooking applications in Trinidad and Tobago. It does not apply to DME LPG blends, which may be used as aerosol propellants or as petrochemical feedstock or for any other industrial uses. It also does not apply to the labeling and packaging of DME LPG blends. So at this point in time, the focus and the core of what we wanted to do with TTTS1 was to enable the research and development of the product and get it rolling and getting everything moving along. So the focus was on understanding what would be the minimum requirements for the chemical composition of DME blended with LPG to be able to come up with a pilot product that would be able to be tested and then work out how the blending and everything will be executed. So the key milestones involved in the process of creating the technical specification. So the need was identified. The Bureau prepared a working draft in November 2021. So it went through a lengthy research and development process. We established the subcommittee of the LPG, DME LPG blending subcommittee from the LPG systems committee. So and then the committee draft was formed. So the subcommittee was established in January 2022. After the completion of the committee phase and the draft was prepared, we have our public comment draft, which was issued in May, and it goes to the period of July 25th, 2022, for us to obtain public comments. And during this public comment period, we have our Stakeholder Forum, which is being hosted today in June 9, 2022. This is where we're currently at in the process. So at the end of the public comment period, we'll be then going to resolving the comments. So the subcommittee will be reconvened. We'll have a meeting where we'll be addressing the comments received on the technical specification. Once those comments are dealt with, the technical specification will be finalized. The projected date for that is August 2022. Once it has been finalized, it will then be submitted to the Board of Directors for approval. Once it has been approved by the Board of Directors, we're looking at publishing, projected date of October 2022. And from there, we'll be going into marketing and promotion of technical specification. So key requirements, general. So LPG and DME LPG blends shall comply with commercial propane-butane mixture specified in TTS 59. So for those of you who are not aware, that TTS 59 is the LPG specifications that we use to govern LPG in Trinidad and Tobago. So then we have the DME and DME LPG blends shall comply with either ISO 16861 or ASTM D7901. So currently there are two standards internationally that govern the chemical properties of DME. So what we're referring to is the pure DME that you have being sold or produced by CGCL at this point in time. So the two standards that are recognized internationally are the ISO 16861 and the ASTM D7901. And lastly, the DME LPG blend shall not exceed 20% mass in the gaseous phase. So this was highlighted by Karuna during her presentation. Right, so the key requirements, the chemical requirements of the DME LPG blend are as follows. So we have the parameters, the limits for the DME LPG blends, and the test methods that would be required to do the testing. So for the mass fraction of DME in gaseous phase of DME LPG blend, so the unit of measure is percent mass, should be less than 20. So the test method is ASTM D2163, which is a gas chromatography method. So it requires a sophisticated piece of instrumentation to be able to separate the LPG and the DME and be able to quantify the DME present in the DME LPG blend in the vapor phase. Next, we have the vapor pressure at the temperature of 40 degrees C in kilopascals. So the vapor pressure should be less than 1380. The test method is ASTM D1267. So the test method involves having a sample bottle of your DME LPG blend, placing it in a temperature controlled environment and using a vapor pressure gauge to be able to determine the vapor pressure of the sample. Next, we have ethyl mercaptan as odorant. So that's measured in milligrams per meter cube. We require a minimum of more than 25 milligrams per meter cube. So ASTM D5305 and GPA 2199 are the methods for testing ethyl mercaptan. So ethyl mercaptan is the odorant that will be present in the blend. So that is the odor that you'd pick up if your container had a leak, or if there was any, or if you had your stove on and it was running and you did not have a flame going. So it is there to indicate to you there are possible gases in the environment. So that's what ethyl mercaptan does and why it's there. That's an odorant. Next, we have vapor evaporation residues in mils as less than 0.05. The test method is ASTM D2158. Next parameter is total sulfur, milligram per kilogram, less than 140. So ASTM D6667 is the test method associated with total sulfur. So if you see, so you'll notice in the table there's a superscript letter A. So what that represents there is we have a note to the bottom, a footnote that indicates that the value of 140 is also inclusive of the ethyl mercaptan added as odorant, because ethyl mercaptan is a sulfur-based compound. So your total sulfur, so the sulfur naturally present in the LPG in combination with the ethyl mercaptan should not exceed a total value of 140 milligrams per kilogram. Next, we have corrosion by the copper strip test with a maximum corrosion index of 1. The two allowed methods for verifying this are ASTM D1838 and ISO 6251. And the final parameter that we will be monitoring is the free water. There should be none, and the two methods allowed are EN 15469 or by visual inspection. So those are the key chemical requirements for the DME LPG blend. So right, so during the public comment period, there were 3 ads run in the daily newspapers, 1 ad per newspaper, so that they ran in the end of May. So next we have stakeholder engagement, which is being done via our social media. We have Facebook, Instagram, and today's Stakeholder Forum. And then we have the comments, which we would like to receive. So I do encourage everyone present today to go to gottbs.com. By the website, you'll be able to, by going to the standard section, you will see standards up for comment, and you can then view the standard, and you can then submit your comments via the website. You can email your comments as well by downloading the comments form and sending them to me. And the deadline for submission of comments is the 25th of July. So intended users of TTTS1. So academia, bottlers of LPG, testing organization, manufacturers, and industry. So what we hope is that through this development of the technical specification, it provides a base tool by which all these players involved can now come together and develop the product further and take it to that next step. As Donna alluded to, the pilot studies and being able to transform it from a technical specification into a standard with the necessary research and development executed. So the next steps involved in the standardization process for the development of technical specification is to collate the comments on TTTS1. Then we'll have the review of the comments, make the changes to TTTS1 based on the comments and editorial feedback, solicit approval of the final draft, technical specification from Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards Board of Directors, and then finally Gazette legal notice and publish TTTS1. So those are the steps involved. So that is my presentation. I'd just like to say thank you very much. And I would like to hand it over to the moderator to continue today's session.
Thank you, Charles, for giving us that overview of the proposed requirements for the draft technical specification. So we have an open question and answer session, and I already see Dr. Chakrabarti with the first question. So Dr. Chakrabarti, you can unmute and ask a question, or I can read it out for you. And any additional questions, please raise your hands.
Yeah, I was in most of the meetings, I think every meeting. So I never think of it today during the presentation. It just came to our mind, because if the LPG demand increases, means the consumption becomes more and LPG requirement is there for the country. We can import a lot of LPG, and maybe in the future another refinery is coming. But we have a fixed quantity of DME production right now, right? So how to cater to the need of that part? Means if there is already some DME LPG blend. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Chakrabarti. So I will turn that question over to Karuna or Donna. But just to let you all know, Dr. Chakrabarti is, again, the chair of our LPG specification committee. And in parallel to this technical specification, we are also developing a LPG code, which would be based on the NFPA code. So Donna or Karuna, would you like to weigh in on this very important question?
Sure, I can take it. So as we know, the plant is currently 20,000 metric tons per year. However, we have the potential to ramp up production based on the increase for the demand. Increase in demand for the product, for the DME. So there is a potential for the plant to ramp up production to provide more DME based on market needs.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Donna and Dr. Chakrabarti. So are there any additional questions or concerns from our participants today? I'm not seeing any hands being raised or any questions in the chat. Is there any particular area that you would like us to clarify? Okay, so we have a question for Mr. Rambaran. Do you want to raise a question, Mr. Rambaran, directly, or do you want me to read it? Okay, so I will read the question.
Yes, I can I know unmute. Sorry.
Okay, great. Okay.
Yeah. What I'm saying, yes, I would have participated in maybe one or two of the meetings because I had other assignments, but Varun attended for Unipet. The committee used, and Mr. Prasad indicated that the IDA document was used as the base document for the DME LPG blend. And this document has 8 elements in it, which dealt with the scope, the reference document, the technical requirement. And I saw the representative, Donna Ramjatan, indicated from the first slide, safety considerations with the blending of the DME LPG. So when we say the technical specification document and we're using the IDA document as the base document, I feel that a more comprehensive document, because when I looked at what is used as the technical specification, it is hanging. To me, it is hanging. It didn't deal, it specified, it looked at the scope and it said what was the reference document and the technical requirement and the test methods, but it ended there. It should have looked at inspection, equipment requirement, and safety, because if I am a stakeholder or personally public and I look at this document, I don't know what is the next thing. I don't know what to say or what to ask, because it doesn't lend itself to a more comprehensive document. If I look at the technical specification for other blend that is done or other additives, it is more comprehensive and it deals with all these aspects, the inspection rules, the equipment requirement, the safety. Because the question I'm asking now technically, is it expected that the TTBS is not going to be another document to deal with all the other elements?
Okay, so I will take that first, and then maybe Charles and the other committee members could weigh in. So the scope of the document that we agreed upon is very specific to just the product itself. We would have determined that because the product is not at a level of maturity where we can substantiate all the additional components that you mentioned. For example, inspection, equipment. What we would have indicated, and it was covered in both presentations from Charles, Karuna, and Donna, is that we are looking first to pilot test the product. The product is not existent currently, and it has to be developed. So this is a lot of product development that has to go in. I would have indicated that we do not have the level of standardization at this point to substantiate all the technical requirements. It was indicated that we would like to do the pilot tests, and that will inform what additional requirements we need to cover in the full standard. So as TTBS, we would have taken a very cautious decision. One, given that the product does not exist. Two, given that we would need to verify and confirm the relevant limits and the test methods. While work has been done in other countries, a lot of countries are still engaging in experimental work around the blend. And we wanted to take that very cautious approach before we issue a final updated national standard that has the benefit of pilot testing, a level of verification. Some of the key issues would have been, so we would like to do this blend, but what is the impact on the equipment that it has to be used with? So ranging from the cylinder it has to go in, to hoses, to the actual stove that it has to be connected to in the cooking application. So because we are not at that level of standardization as yet, because the technology is not fully mature, we are taking a very cautious approach, first developing a standard or specification, in this case, to outline what are the key testing parameters, because we really want to go through that pilot testing stage and have a periodic evaluation of the potential safety issues that may arise.
Okay, but just a comment, do you think that the timeline for that is practical to do all this by the end of the year?
So we have worked on a tentative timeline, and we have our partners, the Ministry of Energy, Industry, NGC, Caribbean Gas Chemicals Limited, and we also have the benefit of the technical experts. Now, one of the key issues would be that pilot testing stage, and we do have a commitment among the partners in this exercise that we have a certain time frame to look at. Now, the end objective is for the product to be commercialized, but we have to go through several steps before we can get to that end stage. So while we have focused on the very specific requirements for the blend itself, we are also very aware of all the additional requirements that would need to be in place. So I mentioned that we need to look at the associated equipment, the final stove that the cylinder is connected to. So we do understand there are lots of issues. Some countries would have elicited to do a lot of market and prototype testing in their countries. And we'd like to follow a similar process, which is why we have a very solid technical committee membership for this particular exercise to help aid in the process. In terms of inspection, there are lots of responsibilities for the companies that will be involved in the bottling process. We have the transportation requirements. So I would say that setting the technical requirements for the parameters is just the first step in a very long process. I mentioned that Dr. Chakrabarti is the chair of the LPG System Specification Committee. We are looking at the adoption of the NFPA code, and we would also have to look at what are the other requirements for the safe installation, use, transport, storage of DME LPG as well.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that, you did mention that the TTBS is also working on a parallel LPG code. How is this integrated into this DME LPG? Or would it be separate from this DME LPG or another document to come?
It is another document to come. It is a separate document. It is essentially based on the NFPA code. What we would have to look at in the development of that particular code is whether we make any provision for the DME LPG blend. So both activities are happening in parallel. What the international literature has suggested is that the DME LPG blend would be suitable for the use in the same type of LPG cylinders. However, I think you would be well aware that the NFPA code does not cover DME LPG blend. As I said, this product has not reached a level of technical maturity at this point. So what we're trying to do is to synergize both initiatives. So the committee that is looking at the LPG code is the main committee, and the subcommittee for the DME LPG blend is a subcommittee under that committee reporting, so that we ensure that there's alignment in both documents. So first, we want to start off with the technical specification. We are looking at the LPG code, and we will have to make a determination whether the same safety requirements established in the LPG code would apply to DME LPG, or whether any deviations would be necessary.
Okay, just one, thanks for that. Just when you're considering the code, you should consider looking at NFPA 55, which covers compressed gas, which most likely the DME will fall into that, because NFPA 58 does not cover the DME as compressed gas. That's a comment.
Yes, so we are looking at all the different, at this time, the LPG code is very specific to LPG. So we have not included any provisions in terms of DME LPG. So as I said, this for TTBS and for me personally is the first step in a very long process. And as we indicated, the DME LPG blending is fairly new. There are international committees at ISO that look at DME itself, but there isn't anything at the international level for DME LPG blend. So we, as Trinidad and Tobago, we're doing a lot of research and development, and we may be the first country to issue something via a national standards body. So we are keeping abreast of the international developments, especially with regard to the level of standardization, because as TTBS, I would say that we would not want to put out a document, whether it be a standard or technical specification, that inherently creates any safety issues. So we want to take the precaution of going through that pilot testing stage. So I would also invite Donna and Karuna if you wanted to add anything, as well as Charles, if you wanted to add any comments on this particular point.
Yes, hi. So in terms of Mr. Ambrose' point, those are well received, and we considered all of it as well. So just with regards to the NFPA 55 versus the 58, so it was the discussion around it that had come about from us attending a IDA meeting, is that the International Association is attempting to have DME classified as part of the LPG to fall under the broad heading of LPGs, because as we know, when we speak of LPG, we speak of specifically propane and butane. So the discussion is around whether or not DME in this case can be classified as part of as a subset of LPG. So in evaluating and looking at the different standards that we'd have, it would be part and parcel of it in terms of the evaluation. So it's about understanding where the research is leading and how the development is occurring, because we did look at all those things, and as you alluded to with the IDA's document, they had additional factors. But for us, when we were developing and we were going through all the facets, as Ms. Ramachala indicated, there were certain things that for us that we needed to do and vet more. So which is why we focused on the chemical specifications, the chemical requirements, more so than the other factors, because we needed a lot more research and a lot more proof to say this is what we'd want to do and how we'd want to do it. So that's why we haven't addressed the factors like seals and different things like that. And those will be in the things to come once the research is there and we have the proof and we can say, well, yes, this works this particular way, and we have all that is necessary. So that's why we were so focused in how we built the technical specification.
Thank you, Charles. Does anyone else want to comment on this particular issue? So you can raise your hand.
Sorry, just nothing to add on NGC side. I think you covered it perfectly.
Okay, thank you, Donna. Karuna?
No, I think you covered it as well, all aspects of it. Yes.
Okay, great. Any additional questions?
I have one more. Clyde here again.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I know when you indicated from the start, well, okay, I understand the concept of the voluntary standard and the technical specification. And I know, I don't know if you will be able to comment on it, or Ministry of Energy representative might be able to comment. As it's voluntary, and I know that, okay, it will be accepted or driven by the enforcement agency or the regulator. If I am a distributor or a bottler, how does that lend itself to say, well, okay, I must put DME into LPG, or that's one, or can I make the decision that, look, I want to bottle LPG, I don't want to bottle LPG and DME? That's one. And secondly, if one asks me as an investor, a private investor into the business, what is the benefit? I know something was said about earlier, the benefit of LPG, the benefit of putting DME in the LPG. Is it an issue of subsidy issue, or what it is? Because what I'm saying, you have renewable LPG, which we don't really follow in Trinidad. We don't do any biomass or biogas. We actually use natural gas processing to get LPG. So it is we are not in the really supply chain of our LPG. I'm saying as a private investor, if I could just bottle LPG, or it will be in the grapevine or the process train or the supply chain, to insist that we use DME in the LPG for market.
Thank you, Mr. Amaran, for that question. So I will go first as a voluntary document. So starting first with the technical specification. There's no mandate from the TTBS's side in terms of mandating the bottlers to use DME and have this blend existing. The role that TTBS is facilitating at this time is one of technical development. So we're looking at the technical specification, and there may be other market considerations or regulatory considerations that will influence whether there's any mandate for DME to be blended with LPG, or whether the bottlers can maintain the LPG. So from the TTBS perspective, this is purely voluntary for us. So both the draft technical specification as well as any future standard that covers DME LPG. So TTBS does not have the primary regulatory responsibility at this particular time. So I would invite Donna, Karuna, or any representative of the Ministry of Energy to indicate their thoughts on this.
I ask the question again because if we are now embarking on designing to do LPG bottling, and this is the reason why I'm asking, I have to notify our potential manufacturers that we intend to put DME, and how the front-end engineering will have to change, or it will have to be modified to now incorporate DME. That's why I have the basis to answer the question.
Understood, Mr. Amaran. So I would invite, Karuna or Donna to weigh in on this. There's a long process ahead of us still in terms of the technical specification being upgraded. This product has not been fully commercialized here as yet. and it may be an opportunity for any private investors or bottlers to look at. But the market requirements is beyond the scope of the technical document for TTBS. So really we're looking at, the driving force from the Ministry of Energy, any private investors, any potential market opportunity, but that is separate. And we are not quite at the point where, say, there's any mandate to change existing systems. And this has to be treated in a very careful way. We want to ensure that the safety considerations are fully addressed. And on the parallel side, there will be commercial factors that drive whether there is blending of DME LPG. I think it would have been well covered in terms of the presentation from Karuna and Donna, but I invite them to weigh in as well.
Okay, I can answer, and I fully agree with what you have said before. We are really at the preliminary stages, which is this technical specification. We have to deep dive with all stakeholders, including the regulator, to discuss all the issues to moving from technical specifications into the national standard. And that's where we would flesh out the details of the product and the introduction of the product onto the market and the requirements for the same. So at this point, we are unable to give detailed answers in terms of mandates and those kinds of things, because we really need to have further engagement with all stakeholders. And that includes the regulator as well, which is ministry.
Okay, no problem. I just threw it out here.
So, Mr. Rambaran, did you go ahead?
You go ahead. I was just saying that I just played the feeling that I know that I'm involved in it and I have to take everything because I have to do management of change if there are changes. So I try to be proactive.
Yes, Mr. Rambaran. So we agree. So this is why we're doing this session, to give an overview of what is coming. The market and commercial considerations will be one that the private investors and the companies would have to assess. And as TTBS, we would also support the work in terms of what the Ministry of Energy and energy industry would need to effectively regulate as well. But at this time, we are still very early in the process. This is like early notification for all stakeholders, especially those that have the commercial interest in really producing this blend of DME on the local markets.
Hi, Nandita. This is Jamie Ann Baba, plant engineer, Phoenix Park Gas. I just want to endorse everything that you and Donna would have contributed to answer Mr. Rambaran. I also like to add that the DME LPG mixture is also a lower carbon emission fuel. So in the theme of sustainability, which internationally most industry is striving towards, we're actually reducing the carbon footprint with this DME LPG blend, which is also another motivation to actually strive towards this.
Thank you, Jamie Ann, for that. So I think, it is very important that we also look at that sustainability agenda, because some of the discussions at the international level, not just in terms of standardization, but the international community is really centered around the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The net zero initiatives would also be critical as well. And a lot of the initiatives that we are looking at now would fall under that purview. So whether it be having a lower carbon footprint or fuel for cooking applications, or the use of electric vehicles, or green buildings, or more energy efficient buildings and appliances. So there's a vast amount of work that we are doing at the country level to support that initiative. And this directly aligns to that mandate as well. Okay, so I would invite again any questions from the participants. Is there any particular aspect of the technical specification that you'd like us to focus on, or any general questions?
So one thing to note, borrowing from Unipet here, one thing, and I would have been part of the subcommittee in the development of this technical specification, and one thing we probably forgot to include is the actual purity of the DME to be used in the blend. It's nowhere on the document.
Thank you for that, Mr. Gangaram. So we'll address that. So that is a very good comment. So we'll note that the purity of the DME.
And one thing further, in terms of the actual blend, and I know it came up in conversations in some of these meetings. Are we going to use propane butane blend 70-30 ratio as it currently is for LPG local? Or are we going to blend straight DME into propane? So we need to look at the closer into that as well.
Thank you for that comment, Mr. Gangram. I think that is also aligned to one of the other activities that we have to engage in at TTBS is also the revision of our LPG specification. So I'm taking a note of that so that we could have a technical discussion on that. I don't know if Charles, Jamian, Karuna, or even Don, if you wanted to weigh in on the blending itself and in terms of, you know, what type of LPG is used.
Hi, Nadita. So I'll start off. So based on the discussions that we had agreed upon during the committee stage was that we'd be using the propane butane mixture, which is the 70-30. But as indicated, well, the TTS 59 is up for review as well. So, but the discussion was around the blending process because this was raised with NP. So Ms. Garnis had indicated that the NP uses 70-30 as their base blend for the propane butane mixtures. So in this case, it would come down to having discussions with bottlers and understanding how their process works, and then determining best how DME would be introduced into it. That was the conversations we were having and how things were progressing in terms of what would occur. But it is specified within the technical specification that it would be the propane butane mixture specified in TTS 59 would be the base for the blending with DME. In terms of the purity for DME, it was not explicitly stated whether it would be aerosol grade or fuel grade. It was simply stated to adhere to ASTM 7901 or ISO 16861. So in this case, yes, it would be something that we definitely need to take into account now and add into the specification to state whether it would be the fuel grade or the aerosol grade that would be used in this case while adhering to ASTM 7901 or ISO 16861. Thank you for that point, Perrin.
Thank you, Charles. So I just like to again emphasize the importance of the pilot test that is necessary in terms of the blending. Because other countries may use slightly different mixtures in their own LPG DME blending process, which is why we're taking the approach of the technical specification to allow the evaluation or verification of the product to be done. But I invite any comments around this. Mr. Gangram, if you wanted to raise anything else, you can go ahead.
Thanks for the feedback. One question further, Charles, the 70-30 blend. All right, that we class as LPG. Now, I know we still basically have to be blend and tested. Is it that we intend to, coming out of the blend and testing going forward, and all the lab quality analysis and stuff, is the final blend subject to change after the entire process? Or are we sticking 100% to the 70 LPG and the 20% DME added on to that?
So I would say this would come down to the testing, and this is where with NGC, driving forward, and we have the stakeholder conversations and understanding where and how. Because this thing because we have Mr. Motilal, if I could call upon you from NP, we know that NP has 70/30 as your that is the blend that you all sell onto the retail market.
Yes, well, yes, hold on a second.
So I know that for NP, but the case of it, when you look at maybe Ramco or the other LPG distributors, we may have different. They may use different LPG blends, as the case may be. There may be distributors who sell pure propane, or they may do different blends, as the case may be. So there would be a lot of research that would have to go into that, and then conversations with the bottlers and distributors. So I would invite Mr. Motilal just to give feedback on NP's side of how they would view blending and how it may occur, or what is their current practice and how it takes place.
All right. Good morning, everyone. So it's a little bit, so as I say, you kind of have to understand the operations, right? So right now, PPGPL is the supplier. And so even though they are the supplier, they have the LPG and their storage, and they sell to the NP, and we have 3 different points through which they sell. So we pick up from PPGPL, there's a neighboring company, Aerogas, because when Petrotrin was shut down, PPGPL just did not have sufficient infrastructure or the appropriate infrastructure to satisfy the Trinidad market. So we use Aerogas was used, and there's a pipeline, so they have some filling points, and there's an isobutane line that goes down to Paria, formerly Petrotrin. So we use those butane tanks there, and we're able to fill. So we have the trucks now. So the trucks pick up at the different points, and they take it to C-lots, so that's in Trinidad. And the same, well, Ramco would have their trucks, and they take it down to their filling plant in South. Now, when we purchase from PPGPL, and no matter where the pickup point is either we get in pure propane or pure butane. It's not a mixture, so we do actually get the 70/30 mix from the supplier. And of course, we have to put them in different tanks. And of course, you would understand the challenges we would have, because, you know, if maybe they're short on butane for some reason, maybe some maintenance is going on, and they say, well, no butane for 2 days, and you only get propane, so you get a propane-rich mixture. So it fluctuates. It's typically about 60/40, but it does fluctuate from time to time. So that's one. With respect to blending, I would prefer if it's blended higher up the chain and then passed down to the wholesaler. So I wouldn't have blending to do, because we really don't have the facility to blend at the moment at NP and neither at Ramco to get the appropriate mix or the appropriate ratio. So ideally, it should be, when it goes into the tank wagon, it should be mixed at that point. That's my take on it. With respect to the mix, so the only other mix you can really get is propane, and those are for more industrial customers. So Ramco would be the one to distribute propane. So probably 2 of their tanks, they put propane only, and they fill their bulk trucks up with it, and they actually go and fill, you know, there's the malls and the crematorium and that kind of thing, restaurants, hotels. So that's basically how it is in Trinidad. As I say, I prefer if it's done higher up the chain rather than having us mix it. The second thing is, so we also have the Tobago market. And Tobago is, LPG is sent a little bit differently. So it's carried on a marine vessel. That one is a 70/30 mix. So that hits the 70/30 mix on spot, because it's mixed into one compartment from the supplier, PPGPL. It's put into one compartment, and then that goes into the, and that goes up to Tobago. I would prefer something similar, where if we could do the mixing locally, when I say locally, at PPGPL, and then it goes up. So when it goes into the tanks there, we already know what the mixtures are. I don't know if that kind of clarified how it operates.
Thank you, Mr. Motilal, for that very comprehensive overview. So I think there's a lot more work for the technical subcommittee to look at. So we are taking careful note of the concerns, and it is especially important for the commercial interests as well as the regulatory interests to adequately define where the blending takes place, because we appreciate some of the logistical challenges as well. So thank you for that comment. So I'd invite any other concerns that the
You're welcome.
participants would like to. Okay, great. Any other concerns? So I'm not seeing any hands, but feel free to raise any questions. I would just like Charles, if you could just do one thing, could you share the document right now, the draft technical specifications, so that we can give a perspective on the technical committee members who have been involved both at the specification committee and the subcommittee level?
Sure, no problem. Loading up now. All right, there we are.
Okay, so if you could just scroll down to our committee page, we wanted to just give an overview of some of the key committee members. So as I indicated, Dr. Chakrabarti is here with us today, so thank you for that.
No problem.
And on the subcommittee, you'd see that we have a very diverse group of some of the key stakeholder interests. So if there are any additional comments, or please feel free to liaise directly with Charles. He would have provided his contact information as well. And I would seek to wrap up today's session because I'm not seeing any additional queries in the chat or any hands raised. But before I close, I would just like to know, Shakola, would you like to make any statements on behalf of the ministry? Okay, so if there are no further comments or issues, I'd like to thank everyone for their participation in today's session. So we appreciate all the feedback. The document is available for review, and we have some time before the comment period closes. So thank you for all the presentations from Karuna, Donna, Charles. Thank you to Dr. Chakrabarti and the committee members, as well as Dr. Ali, for participating in today's session. So we appreciate all the feedback, and if there are any technical issues that we need to investigate further, or any of the logistical issues that we need to work on, please let us know. In one of our upcoming activities would also be to review our national standard for LPG. And that is one of the related projects here. And a little later on in this year, we will be doing the stakeholder consultation for LPG code. I don't have a defined timeline as yet. That work is still in the committee stage, and we will advise the stakeholders of that stakeholder forum to provide feedback. I'd like to thank everyone for showing up today and providing feedback. And I would turn it over now to Rodney to give some final closing remarks.
Hi, good afternoon again, everyone. I would just like to thank everyone for participating in the meeting and the very good comments that we had coming from the participants. I know that the standardization division will be looking at all of the comments to determine how that can help to shape this technical specification. So again, thanks for coming and the comments, and have a good day, everyone. Back to you, Nadita.
Thank you, Rodney. So we appreciate your support as well. I'd like to thank Charles and standardization team and all the members of our specification committee for LPG, as well as the subcommittee for the DME LPG blend. So we have taken some notes of our meetings and we will be addressing them with the relevant committees. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day, and please reach out to us directly if you have any additional comments.